Aramu Muru. This is a patron-sponsored video. A patron asked me to look into the structure at Aramu Muru. It's been discovered in the 90s and visited and shown on videos by Brien Foerster, Hugh Newman and Freddie Silver, and I'm sure some others. The patron asks me, Charles, what do you think about ancient false doors like in Aramu Muru, Peru? Do you reckon they can be entered while tripping on DMT or some ancient cocktail of mind-altering drugs? So, let's get into this. We're going to look at the structure, exactly what is there, the surrounds, the known history of exploration of the structure, and then provide a possible interpretation, which has far-reaching consequences. This structure in Peru seems to have been rediscovered in the mid-1990s when guide Jose Luis Delgado Mamani was exploring the area. He saw that the rock was smoothed down to a flat surface. He noticed the recess also and the twin vertical inlays on the surrounds, the stiles or the portico. The name Aramu Muru means doorway of the serpent, and in fact if you look at it from afar it looks like it is the head of a giant snake or other creature. In the drone footage in the Megalithomania video you can see that in fact the serpent, which is a long ridge, may have spikes on its back, a bit like a stegosaurus or dragon. On Google Maps, we see the gate is on the end of this long ridge, presumably the head, or something that was seen as the head. As an aside, I actually saw similar patterns in terms of the layout of the 4000 BC Hunebedden or giant graves in the Netherlands, and these were laid out along pretty much the same types of ridge. Let me add a brief excerpt so you see what I'm talking about. The ridge even goes in the same direction. It's possible north-south ridges were selected for east-west light patterns to be cast on one or both of the sides at sunset or sunrise.
Do you see all these purple spots here? We're actually on two ridges. So the ridges are the cosmic serpent, and all the museum info centres are on these are on the ridges where all these dolmens are found, and all the dolmens there, of course, called the area is called the De Hondsgrug, and it's UNESCO Global Geopark.
Now the gate, if we can call it that, is about 23 foot square. The alcove is T-shaped. It reminds us of the Göbekli Tepe dolmens possibly. As we shall see later in the video, that shape is very likely a clue to what is being represented. Locals in fact call this the Gate of the Gods, and they claim that tall men accompanied by glowing balls of light walk through the doorway. It does sound quite eerie. The alcove is 6'6". It is big enough for an adult wearing an elaborate headdress to stand within. Possibly this is a clue as to its use. In front of the gate is a megalithic-looking semicircle of stones, possibly representing the moon. Nearby is a kind of pathway next to a hut, possibly a causeway leading up to it, flanked by what look like megaliths. Furthermore, there is a type of pathway which looks almost like a staircase leading along the length of the ridge. And there are even tunnels said to be nearby. Does Aramu Muru exist in isolation? On the contrary, there are several such doorways and alcoves in Peru and in the Andes, known as portals or doorways. They are also placed behind fountains. They are said to be for meditation or for astral travel. But that also sounds like what a New Age, modern person would expect. So what are they really in terms of what the ancient people thought? And where does the portal idea originate, if that is what it is? For years, the tour guide and antiquary, Freddie Silver, has been referring to these as portals on his website, sacredearthjourneys.ca. Another article from 2015 refers to the door as the spiritual doorway of the Incas. In 2011, Brien Foerster visited the site, and in his video he asks if it is a stargate, and he also calls it a portal. The word stargate, of course, has both astro-religious alignment as well as mental teleportation implications, not to mention physical teleportation implications. In Foerster's video, he states there are giant snakes above the door, and the two style or pillar-like carvings on each side are emblematic of duality, male and female. And there really isn't much more information because it was only discovered around 1996. In his 2017 Megalithomania video on Aramu Muru, Hugh Newman, who visited the site, along with several others such as Andrew Collins, says that this doorway is similar to the doorways to nowhere that you find in Turkey. Hugh also points out that it's in a Martian-like landscape, which I suppose is a clue that this relates somehow to the worship of the fire god of the underworld, because worldwide he was known as the benefactor and creator of mankind in the most ancient traditions. In this Megalithomania video, Andrew Collins actually points out that this is another connection between ancient Peru and the culture of Göbekli Tepe. So we're getting into the idea of transatlantic contact. So that is another clue. To find out just what Aramu Muru is, we need to do a little worldwide research, and you'll see why this is important soon enough. The Chavin culture appears on the coast in about 1200 to 900 BC, about the time of the Trojan War. It was a time of great migrations in the Old World, a dark age of endless warfare. And one might assume that the Chavin culture, based on legends from the area, may not be entirely indigenous, and you'll see why in a moment. Because I read in an obscure publication called Sowers of Thunder, Giants in Myth and History by Anthony Roberts. His books are exceedingly rare. That's the only one I could afford, and it's from the 70s. And he says that the native peoples of Peru and Bolivia describe that one day, long ago, a race of red-haired giants appeared on the coast. They then pressed inland, literally raping and pillaging and spreading their civilization. They were said to have built rock-cut rivers. They are also said to have lowered mountains and raised valleys. Are we looking at the time of the migration of the Long Skull people from Eastern Europe, found by Brien Foerster to be the genetic home of this race? If so, could we find similar doorways to Aramu Muru on the other side of the planet? By travelling from Eastern Europe to South America, possibly by sea, these people may have passed through the Near East, perhaps also conquering that area. A far-fetched theory? Maybe. However it came to be, we indeed see very similar rock-cut structures to the Inca portals in the Old World. Let's investigate, because I'm sure I've seen this kind of thing before, but yes, it is in the Old World, and that is how I propose to tackle the question of what these rock-cut structures are, these portals, by seeing what they are in the Old World. So since my patron asked me to investigate and give my opinion, I've decided to do just that, and the conclusion I've come to is that this is a religious practice also found in the Old World. In fact, it's in Persia and territories occupied by the Persians where rock-cut tombs are prolific, but actually the practice is older than Persia. The inhabitants of Asia Minor and the Levant were very big on rock-cut tombs. Here is the Phrygian Midas monument. Notice the alcove and the twin pillars. Does it not look familiar? While marvelling at this monument and its similarity to Aramu Muru, I found that someone had beaten me to it. I came across a blog article called The Other World in the Andes Part 2 by Freddie Silva, 2016. He actually says that the Aramu Muru has a twin in the Old World. he writes, rather optimistically, that comparing the two would lead anyone to believe that they were carved by the same artist. He says that no king's body was ever found here, however, and it's incorrectly labelled as the Tomb of King Midas. He writes that on the summit of this facade, this is the one in Turkey, is a rock-cut altar. There are also entrances to tunnels that lead 900 feet down into the bedrock, where he reckons initiation was conducted. He says the same is true of Aramu Muru, where there are vestiges of a rectangular structure at the summit, and behind the Amuru portal, he writes there is a tunnel which descends 24 feet into the rock face before reaching a brick wall. This wall was erected by the authorities to stop people venturing any further and vanishing into the bowels of the earth, because the locals say the tunnels extend 800 miles to Cuzco. Of course, Silver's information moves us to a position where transatlantic contact isn't just a possibility, but even a likelihood. How else could this have occurred? It also shows us that these doors are actually a kind of portal and entrance to the underworld. This, I suppose, makes it likely that bodies were buried in tunnels nearby. So I'd like to present you some evidence for this, and you can draw your own conclusions one way or the other. There are more Old World structures which look less like Aramu Muru than the Tomb of Midas. In fact, the Tomb of Midas is the closest one that I've seen. So, for example, here are rock-cut Lycian tombs of the 4th century BC in Dalyan, Turkey. Here is majestic Petra, Jordan, a city of rock-cut tombs. Here is the general view of Petra. You may recognise it if, like myself, you really love the 3rd Indiana Jones movie. Here is a Tiwanaku-like carving in the theatre of Petra. It's hard to miss. Here are the royal tombs of Petra. Here is a Roman coin of a Roman emperor called Geta, assassinated aged 22 in 211 AD. The coin shows the Petra temple with a statue of Tyche in the middle. Tyche is the goddess of fortune and prosperity. Such goddesses are always popular in rich merchant towns. The Italian version is Fortuna. Tyche is the daughter of Titans Oceanus and Tethys. The names may not be familiar to you, even if you are familiar with Greek gods. This is because these are Titan gods, not Olympian gods. In ancient times, so the Greeks held, one set of gods, the Olympians, destroyed or defeated the other set, the Titans. This may be a memory of a huge war in deeply ancient times. And where do the Titans come from? Well, it's likely they came from the west. Titans Oceanus is an interesting name. Oceanus was the ocean beyond the Pillars of Hercules, and Tethys is the goddess of the water of that ocean. Here is a picture of Persepolis. Note that the stones are Pumapunku-like. Persepolis seems to have been chosen as a capital by the Persians for unknown reasons, because archaeologists say it was in a poor location. I think the ruins tell another story. The Persians clearly sought to legitimize their rule by possibly occupying the ruins of a former great city. So where else are rock tombs found? So they are something seen in Tuscany, but not in other parts of Italy or even Europe. And this is because the Etruscans are an oddity. Ancient historians claimed they came from Asia Minor and they conquered their Italian area. This would have formerly made them a naval people. The place they were said to have come from in Asia Minor is of course very prolific in rock-cut tombs. The rock-cut tomb practice of the Etruscans exposed them as ancient immigrants to the area from the east. So we see people bring this practice with them. The later rock-cut tombs of the 1st century BC Asia Minor are in fact very different from what is found in Peru, but the Phrygian 7th century BC tomb is actually exceedingly similar to Peru. Does this imply a date of migration in about this time? Here is traditional Anatolian clothing of central Anatolia, about the Phrygian region. Note the colours and the prevalent use of headdresses among men and women. All traditional costumes worldwide are colourful, but not all employ the headdresses. Now, here are Inca clothing styles. Again, note the use of headdress. Back to Anatolia. This is Armenian dress for a wedding. To me, some aspects of the Anatolian designs could almost pass for Inca, but there is nothing definitive or really compelling in the comparison. Back to the 7th century BC. This is a good date for any migration. For example, in the writings of Plato, we read a great deal of ancient history, not just the Atlantis legend. We hear in some dialogues about what Greece looked like in the earlier Mycenaean period, and they even say the sea level was different. Plato claims that in former times, many Greek islands, which are now just craggly mountains, had great plains for farming. It seems they are saying the sea level of the classical age is higher than in previous times. So, in addition, we read that in the Atlantis legend, Atlantis was associated with a trade within the Atlantic Ocean, and this trade involved the use of the metal orichalcum. It was thought to be all a myth until several years ago it was actually discovered that a new type of golden alloy found in pre-Greek shipwrecks was discovered and was presumed to be orichalcum. The Greeks had heard about this substance, but they had never seen it in their own day as it related to ages past. They wrote of those ages, and they wrote that the Atlantic was once navigable all the way to the opposite continent, which I presume is America, but that this knowledge or ability had been lost following a catastrophe of some sort. As mentioned, we notice that the Chavin culture appears on the coast in about 1000 BC or even earlier. This is a time of the great megalithic builders. This culture, this Chavin culture, was said to be the foundation of pre-Columbian South American artworks. Interestingly, there is an old world looking Chavin pyramid with, surprise, surprise, a labyrinth beneath it, accessed by walking through a very Minoan looking entrance. Instead of a hideous minotaur though, one enters and one encounters a holy pillar. It's a strange totem with diamonical engravings of snakes or the world serpent. I conservatively interpret it as a pillar of creation, a snake of Eden on its tree, as one possibility. Is this the guardian also of this sacred labyrinth? And again, the unique shape in the roof beams that we see in the facades. In conclusion, I think the Inca doorways, such as Aramu Muru, are probably rock-cut centres of worship or tombs, as they are symbolic entrances to the underworld. Since the world serpent symbol of creation is depicted, the people buried nearby in tunnels would seem likely to have been expected to have been resurrected, or to live forever. I think we have also shown in this video that Brien Foerster's redhead long skull theories are completely compatible with a journey from southern Russia through the Near East to Peru and beyond in around 1000 BC, basically the time of the Dark Ages. This is the time that Etruscans conquered Rome and took over Rome, fleeing the area. This might be the time when the redheads left that area and went to America, and I think the archaeology bears this out. I think that the portals we see are effigies of the entrances of underworld temples, and they were built to save time rather than having to build an entire temple. One simply visits the rock temple, which is the home, as we saw at Chavin, of a cosmic serpent. Hence also the home of the giant expelled from heaven, whatever you want to call him. And this is just as in the old world we see temple facades cut into rock, and we don't actually know the purpose of many of those either, but they are said to be tombs. A way forward therefore exists for us to discover what these portals are by looking at the old world. We can even look at astronomical alignments regarding these, and I don't think that work has yet been done because of the fact that this and many other places do lie along north-south ridges which face east-west, the rising and setting sun. Thank you.